Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's Tour Catch-Up, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com.
Pegula races to the crown in Montreal.
Sinner soars to his first ever Masters title.
And the Davis Cup Finals team nominations have been announced.
Chris, today is the 14th of August and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ. Jessica Pegula and Jannik Sinner are your champions in Canada, in Toronto and Montreal. But we're not really going to be thinking about that because we've got Cincinnati already underway, back-to-back Masters. It's not quite the Sunshine Double with Indian Wells and Miami. And in fact, I don't actually have a name for it. But we're getting much closer, aren't we, to the US Open, which I feel is slowly coming onto the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, Sloane Stephens is on court, so I'm immediately in Cincinnati. I'm locked in. I've forgotten that, that the last tournaments in Canada happened. So I'm going to have to refresh my memory on this podcast.
There's overlap.
There is. They played on Sunday.
The draws came out on Friday. They played on Sunday. I'm not going to lie. I know earlier in the season, and we'll get onto this, I know earlier in the season we were talking about 2-week Masters events and we were being very critical, I feel, on the podcast. But at the same time, I'm not going to lie, back-to-back single-week Masters events is also, it doesn't feel very ideal, does it? Particularly with the weather we've seen this week.
Well, not if you're Rybakina, but maybe if you're Novak Djokovic and you only play one, or Linda Noskova, who might have had the advantage of that week off, having made it to the final of Prague on Monday. And that was only a week ago. So time flies, doesn't it? But I wouldn't play both.
It's tricky. It is that tricky situation, particularly if you're a top player of, do you play both? Can you play both? Or should you only play one? We're going to be discussing that. As you said, Rybakina, not a particularly happy customer in Montreal, but we're going to be discussing all the action from there. We're also going to be discussing all the action from Toronto, as well as what's to come in Cincinnati, plus the Davis Cup Finals team nominations have been announced, so we're going to be looking over those as well. But before we get into all of that, Chris, what's been your highlight of the past week?
Well, mine is based in 2006, something that's been circulating online.
I'll get my time machine.
Yes, exactly. Deep in the Twitter and the Instagram circuits is a picture of Novak Djokovic, of him receiving his first ever title, which was at the Dutch Open in 2006, where he actually won an iPod. An engraved iPod was the trophy.
Wow.
Which is, I mean, he's obviously kind of since then made probably a little bit more than that and probably can afford to buy his own iPod, doesn't have to win them anymore. Probably he's won a few cars along the way.
That's probably a collector's item now.
I'm thinking, where is it? Does he have it? That's the only thing we haven't had, is he hasn't engaged with it to tell us.
Has he got music on it?
Well, maybe give it to his kid or something like that, and we'll see what was on his iPod in 2006. Was it a shuffle? It wasn't a shuffle, I can confirm.
I do feel like a lot of tournaments and their trophies, they try and go for like the contemporary look that is always like timeless, and it looks the same like 10 years ago and it looks the same 10 years in the future. But I'm not gonna lie, I do quite like a trophy that dates very, very quickly, and perhaps this iPod trophy is probably one of the ones that's dated the most quickly, I think, on the tour.
Just from a functional perspective, I'm not even sure if you can rip something to your iTunes anymore, so technology has surpassed it. But I would say there's another trophy update as well, which is in Cincinnati. They've actually updated the very popular sort of grandma vase, as it's kind of popularly
dubbed. I love the vase.
People do like it with the sort of the foliage going up the side, and now they've kind of made it into a bit of a modernized sort of landscape sort of gradient. So it has.
Is it a new vase?
It's a new vase on the same base. I think they just needed to update the base, and they thought this was a nice opportunity. But that's one that I think I will miss. But I don't miss the iPod. What's caught your attention this week, Joel?
Well, it was a doubles match on the Challenger circuit, the Cordon Challenger. I think I hope I'm saying that correctly, in Italy. And this had a doubles match, which was pretty spectacular in terms of the match tiebreak at the end. We had India's Nikki Punacha and his Australian partner Adam Taylor win a championship tiebreak from 9-love down in the final set tiebreak. They won it 11-9, 11 points on the bounce.
That's gotta hurt, Joel.
Inevitably, I was reading some of the comments on social media, and of course, everyone was thinking like betting, and this is like the most obvious match fixing ever. But I watched it, and I'm like, these guys just played lights out tennis from 9-0 down, and I was like, that just does not happen very often in terms of saving all those match points in a row. Yeah, incredible scenes.
Wait, so you're telling me that you watched all 11 points from the from the tiebreak of the challenger in doubles? Wow, Joel. I mean, let's hope you caught some of Toronto and Montreal this week as well.
I'm a tennis diehard fan through and through. I'm not just about the ATP and WTA tours. I'm all about the challenger circuit as well.
It's not a competition, Joel, but if it is, I'll drop down to ITF.
You can stick to your ITFs. Yeah, there you go. You stick to your ITFs. But really incredible. And not something I was sort of expecting. I think the ATP social media account suggested, was it the greatest comeback of all time?
The stakes weren't that high, I imagine.
No,
in the 73,000
exactly.
euro draw.
Yeah, exactly. So, a little bit of pinch of salt there, but yeah, still very impressive nonetheless. But moving on, before we get into tennis, we actually have a very special announcement, don't we, at Tennis Weekly HQ?
We do. We actually have two. I've got two shout outs. One is happy birthday to Kim, who's not with us this week. She is currently about to probably take her seat in the opera in Vienna, celebrating her birthday. So happy birthday to Kim, who's having a lovely time from some of the pictures she shared with us.
Yes, happy
She's
birthday.
wearing a fabulous hat, which I'm very jealous of, and the weather looks fantastic. So unlike in Montreal, Kim is very much in the sun, as opposed to a 3 a.m. rain delay.
I just hope she's scoping out the Vienna 500. Is it the Vienna 500
yeah,
indoor,
it is. It's
indoor
after
event?
Stockholm. It's a tasty one.
Hopefully she can read my mind. Kim, I know you're enjoying the opera, but afterwards, can you go check out the venue for the Vienna 500, please?
Yes, see if it's worth visiting, and maybe putting a good word with the tournament director if they're there.
Yes.
But the other exciting piece of news is that we have some Tennis Weekly merch that's dropping. It's available now on our Etsy store, and we will put the link in the description. And what's very exciting, you might have seen us tease some of this. Joel is currently sporting a cap, and he's been known to rock a tote bag at his work as well, I believe. And we have got...
They're all very... my colleagues are all very jealous of the tote bag.
Wow, I mean, people... My colleagues are also pretty jealous of some of them. So they're in demand, and you say, no, we cannot give you one. You must log on to our Etsy. And so we partnered with Crippa Design on 2 limited edition tote bags, and then a classic sort of logo cap. And that's the one that Joel is currently rocking as we record. And as we always record, I think it's a new staple for him. Just 15 are available of each. So we have a classic green tote bag, a retro tote bag, and all the proceeds from this will go towards supporting the podcast so that we can keep making the podcast that we love to do, and also provide the podcast that we hope you also really enjoy. So please check it out on our Etsy store. That's www.etsy.com/shop/tennisweeklypodcast, and the link will also be in the description.
Yeah, very, very exciting. I can't lie. I'm a bit of a fashionista, and I love the hat. I wear it now to every recording. So, listeners, if you're interested,
fashion game, Joel, the hat's improved your offering.
I mean, exactly. I was like at 0, and now I'm at 100. But
a solid 5.
We're going to be putting the link in the description. So if you would like to show your support for the show and would like some merch from the Tennis Weekly podcast, whether that's a hat or a tote bag, please consider going on to our Etsy account and purchasing one of those. But we are going to move on now to the tennis, and we're going to be talking about the Masters event that was in Canada across Toronto and Montreal. We're going to be starting with the men in Toronto because, Chris, we had Jannik Sinner win his first ever Masters 1000 crown. He defeated Alex de Minaur in the final, 6-4, 6-1. I think this was his third Masters final. His first time he's managed to get over the line in terms of becoming champion. What did you make of this result? Because it was a straightforward victory. And I feel like a lot of people might be thinking this was a long time coming, given what we've seen from Sinner on the tour over the last few years.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've all been hoping that he would push on. He's obviously pushed on in the slams this year, which has been great. Kind of his effort that he had at Wimbledon. And it's definitely a positive trajectory for him. He's now kind of cementing himself as a top 10 player and really pushing towards top 5. So I think that's a very positive thing. He played fantastic tennis. I think the court was played pretty quickly out there because the ball was being ripped by him. I mean, he was swinging so freely of both sides. It was kind of breathtaking at times, especially in that final. It was almost, he was a bit unstoppable when you add in his movement. I do think it was obviously a great week, but the thing I would say is that he does have this thing where he doesn't have the best record against those top 5 players. And we've talked about it before. And he did manage to escape playing a top 10 player this week. And he managed to escape playing Andy Murray. So a very impressive effort. I'm glad he's got the 1,000 win, but he didn't take out Murray, did he, Joel?
I had a sneaking feeling that Andy Murray would have caused an upset there if he was fit and was able to get onto the court. But yeah, I mean, it was still a great result for Jannik Sinner. I guess, yeah, there'll be a few doubters maybe when you look at that semi-final lineup in terms of Paul, Sinner, Davidovich, Fokina and de Minaur, that, yeah, he is top dog there. And I liked that, he dealt with that pressure and came through it. And, I'd say in the past, he's been in those situations and he's not actually lived up to the billing. So I think it was very good from that point of view. And it lays, I think, a really great platform for, the US Open coming up. And, we talk about, I think, Sinner, particularly with Carlos Alcaraz, and really hoping that rivalry blossoms and kicks on. Chris, for you, is Jannik Sinner with this win? Do you consider him a US Open? I think before this, we would have said he would have been maybe a US Open contender. But with this result, do you think he's still a contender, or would you put him into maybe a favourite category with someone like a Carlos Alcaraz and a Novak Djokovic?
Well, I mean, I think that's some pretty hefty company right there. Obviously, Djokovic wasn't playing, and you always have to caveat that he didn't win Wimbledon, but most tournaments he plays, he's in the final or he wins them. And him not being there definitely does leave an opening in the bottom half of the draw in this case, or the top half, depending on kind of where he is in the draw normally. In terms of the US Open, Sinner does not have the best record of the slams there. I mean, he has lost twice in the first round.
He was so close though to beating. He was so close though to beating Carlos Alcaraz
last year.
It was like 1 point away.
It was so close, and he has had a fourth round and a quarterfinal there in 2021 and 2022. So he has some good form. He's coming off the back of a Wimbledon semi-final. You put him in the mix for sure, but he's definitely not a favourite going into that because he hasn't had to beat kind of on the hard courts one of those top players. And it's fine losing at a Masters 1000 in the lead up, but we've seen how impressive it is and how well the top players are able to peak at the majors. And that's something that he's only just starting to kind of really bring to his game and his performance. So for me, I think he's definitely someone who you'd expect quarters minimum. He's made one quarter this year, so be looking for a quarter or a semi-final again. Could he make a final? Potentially. It does depend on how the draw falls, but that record against top 5 and some of the favourites does lead me to think that maybe he's not going to get it done in New York.
Yeah, I mean, his record at Masters 1000s this season has been very impressive. He's 18-4 in 2023 at Masters 1000s. So it almost feels like to me like he has arrived at this level. And, there's still questions there, I think, for Grand Slams. But I certainly think with, Darren Cahill in his box, the expertise that he is bringing and the fine tuning I think they are bringing to his game, I think it is bringing his level up. I do think there are still some quirks to kind of work out. And, in that final, I do think it was on Jannik Sinner's racket. You can just see his ball striking from the back of the court.
He returned really well.
Yeah, it was overpowering, de Minaur at times, particularly on the forehand side. I did note there were quite a few errors coming from the backhand wing.
That's his weakness, Joel, I'd say.
Yeah, and I would say, there were times when he was like almost pushing for it too much, wanting it too much, and it was leading to these like too many errors, because I don't necessarily think we saw the best of Sinner or de Minaur, in that final. I think it was just, who managed the conditions, which we've seen this week has been a big factor in who wins, who steps out onto the court and who wins. But then, I guess just making sure that you're better than your opponent. And I think Sinner, although he maybe wasn't at 100%, maybe was at like I'd say 85%, and de Minaur, I just think his level, unfortunately, is just not. It's his max is not as high, I think, as what obviously Sinner could potentially reach.
Yeah, I think, as you say, like 80% for Sinner, I think that's pretty reasonable. I mean, he did only make 48% of first serves, which is pretty low. He did obviously back that up well behind the first and second serve. He won 67% of second serve points, which is a pretty good number, whereas de Minaur was in the 40s for both first serve and second serve points won. So it's clear that kind of he was able to play better behind the serve, but if you're playing against some of the top players, those numbers are not necessarily going to give you enough cheap points. And I don't want to be kind of too critical of Sinner, because obviously he's a joy to watch and he's got a fantastic game, but when I've seen him play live, he doesn't like to go backhand line. He does cross quite a lot with the backhand, and I think it is a good shot that he has. I think he's just got to take that on a few more times. I totally understand playing the percentages at key moments, but I mean, how many times have we seen the top players like a Djokovic, Nadal, or a Murray just really go for it, lights out? Because I think that's something we see more on the WTA from Iga, Rybakina, and Sabalenka. They're much more prepared to take the backhand line than I think some of the top 10 ATP players are. And I think it would be something that would probably only add to his game.
I think it is exciting though, because I'm really happy in terms of how, as I said, he's gone and won this now. It feels like a mental block that is now over. And we can see how he gets on at the US Open. Just a quick word on Alex de Minaur, because he got to the final unseeded, had a very tough route. I think he beat Cam Norrie. I watched that match in the first round. He defeated Taylor Fritz, Daniel Medvedev, and then he played Davidovich Fokina in the semi-final, who was very much on form, came through that in straight sets. What's your view on de Minaur in terms of like his trajectory at the moment? Because he's he won in what he got to the final in
Los Cabos.
In Los Cabos, against Tsitsipas. Got now another final here. Is he on an upwards trajectory, or where do you see him going into the US Open? Yeah,
I think he's last year I saw him in Stockholm and I was very impressed with him. I think he's got more on his shots than people give him credit for. I think people used to kind of make fun of the fact his first serve might not be the biggest on the tour. So I think he has got a bit of a bad rap at times, because he definitely does have, and we'll talk about this with Pegula, he definitely does have weapons. He hits the ball harder than you think, flatter than you think. He's a very effective grass courter. And I think he can cause some problems for people. He's probably the quickest mover on the tour. I mean, his foot speed is very, very quick, and it's always been a bit of a battle between pushing forward as well as being defensive, giving yourself enough time. So I think if he's one of those players who belongs in the top 20 for sure, and now he's 12 in the race, I believe, or 12 in the rankings, which is one place above Nick Kyrgios. So you couldn't get two more different players really in terms of the discipline of de Minaur versus kind of the shot making of Kyrgios. And I think it's interesting to see that kind of at their peak ranking, they're not actually too far apart, but in terms of their style, it's just so different. So there's definitely a lot more to his game than people give him credit for, and I do think we might see him in the top 10 by the end of the year.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't think you were going to go that far, because, to me, I still think there's a question of, is he too passive from the baseline? And as a result, lets his opponents sort of take charge. And I think for me, we saw that a little bit in the match against Sinner. But having said that, in the build-up, he did have matches where he was playing a lot more aggressive. And I think that for me is what I've liked seeing of him this season, is that I think before, I've had fans come up to me and brutally, honestly tell me that he's a pusher. And I think this season, I think he's trying to obviously kind of get out of that that identity and that image, and have that element of aggression to add to the things that we all know are really good in his game, like the foot speed and the movement.
He's a good indoors player, Joel. That's why I think, because he played very well in Stockholm last year when I saw him, and I think with Vienna, Kim will scope the courts out for him over there. And then in Paris, I think he's got some good chances because his consistency and he doesn't get injured that much. So he's always there. He's a constant presence on the tour, grinding it out. And I think there are points to be won for players who stay fit until the end of the year and keep competing.
Where were the Carota boys, by the way, in the final? Because we didn't see. Why isn't there like an American fan club?
There needs to be a franchise model, a bit like Domino's Pizza or whatever. We're not sponsored, no sponsorship, but no. There needs to be that you're able. Anyone can be recruited, and then you're able to put on the carrot suit and cheer.
Yeah, I want to see that. I hope we do see the Carota boys at some point, maybe at Flushing Meadows, we'll see. Before we go on to the women's event, I just want to talk quickly about some of the other players, some of the other top seeds. Daniil Medvedev, as I said, was defeated by Alex de Minaur. He was the second seed, went out in the quarterfinals. Carlos Alcaraz, the world number one, lost to Tommy Paul. I think Tommy Paul's actually defeated him twice now.
Yes, he has, yeah.
In Canada.
His nemesis.
Weirdly, Tommy Paul's record, he's a great hardcourt player, I think. Maybe in a similar respects to Alex de Minaur, a little bit underappreciated, I think. And I think we talk about Taylor Fritz, we talk about Ben Shelton. No one really talks about Tommy Paul, but I think on his day, I would say he plays the best tennis out of all the Americans, Francis Tiafoe also included.
Well, he's definitely a big game player, I would say. That's for sure, in terms of his ability to turn up in big matches and find an extra level, which I think at times, people like Taylor Fritz haven't been able to necessarily always go into that next gear and capitalize on moments when they get these opportunities against top players. Because if you don't go out there and kind of really go after it and think you can win it, then you won't. And I think Tommy Paul just has that attitude of, you know what, I'm going to give this a go and I can do it. And I think that's something that is quite unassuming about him, that he doesn't necessarily kind of talk about himself or hype himself up in the way that some other Americans do. He's kind of that, he's very highly ranked, obviously reached a semi-final in Australia. But when it comes to, the US Open, it's always kind of about the Fritzes, the Tiafoes. So I think it'll be interesting to see if kind of this, shielded by those two who might be taking more of the spotlight, if he's able to spring some upsets in Flushing Meadows, because he's not someone you want to see in your draw, because he is a bit of a dangerous ranking. You don't want that in a round of 16, that's for sure.
No, he is 1-6 lost for against top 5 players on hard courts. So he's definitely going to be a threat, particularly with the US crowd behind him. Carlos Alcaraz, is there any worry there? I personally think he reached the quarterfinals playing terrible tennis, some of the worst tennis I feel like we've seen him play this season, and he still managed to make a quarterfinal. Are you sort of worried or not really, given what you saw?
It's his first outing since Wimbledon, so maybe he's a bit rusty. There's been a little bit. People always talk about the fact there are a lot of things that go on after that. It's the ultimate tournament in many ways for so many people. It's, reaching the dream that you never thought you would, and it's a big deal. So there's a natural come down off that, and I don't think you can read into it too much, because we've got Cincinnati next week, and the fact that he hasn't gone deep here might mean that he'll go deep next week or this week now even. So I don't think we can read too much into it, because as you say, he can even win ugly at times if he needs to, and it wasn't good. But then I think at the Canadian Open, I'm not sure how many people tend to peak there and then peak at the US Open. I think it tends to be the Cincinnati performers that take their form through.
It was interesting because both world number ones didn't really, I feel, show their best tennis in Canada, Iga Swiatek included. And still, Iga Swiatek got to the semi-finals and lost to the eventual champion, Jessica Pegula. Now, Chris, this tournament was a complete mess, particularly in the latter stages when it came to scheduling. Before we get on to that, let's very quickly talk about what unfolded on yesterday. Ludmila Samsonova had to play 2 matches, her semi-final against Rybakina, won that, then played Pegula, who was fresh, who had played her semi on the Saturday, and it was just a complete blowout, wasn't it? It was 6-1, 6-love to Pegula. She won 11 straight games. I think the first set took 21 minutes, which was the quickest set, in the whole tournament. It was a bit of a letdown, I'll be honest. If I was a fan there paying all that money for finals action, I mean, yes, they got 2 singles matches, but they did not really get a competitive set amongst it.
No, it was a big shame. And I think, to be honest, you have to look at kind of two groups of people. The WTA, who Rybakina pointed the finger at here, which we can talk about after we've talked about Samsonova's comments, which I think are very true, that the tournament directors are the people who make the decisions about scheduling in a big way. She said everyone knew it was going to rain at 6 p.m. and they didn't change the schedule to make sure that the matches got through. And I think it's a case where these players are top performing athletes, and so often we've seen this year that they aren't given the opportunity to play their best tennis because of the whether it's the weather conditions is one thing, but it's actually the scheduling that I think is mainly to blame, because not having an appropriate backup plan or moving people to smaller courts, because you shouldn't have a player having to play 2 matches for their 2 matches on 2 days at the business end of the tournament, because Samsonova was basically scheduled out of that final. She didn't really have a chance. In between, she said she was going to physio, she was getting taped up, and then suddenly she was back on court again. And it doesn't work like that. So for me, it was a big shame. Pegula played brilliantly, but I think it does take the shine off, because essentially the final was the semi-final.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you saw that in when Pegula won, she didn't celebrate or anything, because to her it probably felt like a little bit of a, it felt a little bit of a hollow victory. And, you talk about the scheduling. I think it was interesting, like the semi-finals, I think one was in the day session. That was the Pegula-Swiatek match. And then Rybakina Samsonova was in the night session. And I know, I get it from the financial point of view. You want these matches across different sessions so you can charge for more tickets. And I feel like we've seen this trend more and more of splitting out semi-finals, 2 different sessions. But this is the risk you run, particularly when you don't have a roof on your centre court, on your stadium court. It just completely threw a spanner in the works. But the annoying thing is, everyone saw this spanner coming from a mile out, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, if you see the weather is going to be torrential rain from 6 p.m, your evening session is not going to happen. And even if it does happen, at what point do you make the decision it's not going to happen? Because then the players are still having to warm up, they're going to have to be on site, they're going to have to get ready, even though they know that it's not happening. We have to all pretend it might. So I think that's one thing. I think another thing is the way that the scheduling's been, that they put players on. We'll talk about the Rybakina issue here, where her and Kasatkina, Samsonova had to play 2 matches in one day. She finished at 11:25 p.m. and then they put on Kasatkina versus Rybakina, which took over 3 hours, 3 hours and 27 minutes.
3 a.m. finish.
Finished.
Are
at
we
3
in
a.m.
Madrid?
I mean, if it's in Madrid, that's different, because Spanish people are still awake then. But in Canada, they are not. It was just kind of, I saw the coach of one of the coaches of Rybakina fist pump, and I don't think it was because she won. I think it was because he wanted to go home and sleep, because he'd been awake for so long. But it's just not how athletes should be treated, because that is not good for the fans. It's not the night session that people want, or that they tried to sell in the first place. And it's led to the situation where Rybakina has kind of said that I have to see how I feel and evaluate the small injuries, which I have now, have to making kind of the decision to be smart. And so the difficulty there is, not only has it caused a problem for the tournament she's in, but will she play Cincinnati? And if she doesn't play Cincinnati, she's a major draw. She's a big player. So it's one of those things where it has knock-on effects. So if you're the tournament director, say, for the National Bank Open, and then Cincinnati might not be pleased with you because you scheduled Rybakina out of their tournament. So it's tricky. And then you get Joel to the WTA issue here. So she did throw them a little bit under the bus, and I think rightly so. She said the leadership is a little bit weak for now, but hopefully something's going to change, because this year it was so many situations which I can't really understand. And I think we've seen it, and we've seen so many times where the ATP have made the better decision and the WTA have fallen foul of it. And it's not good. It's not good. And I think that's something which we've talked about. But what's your take on her comments? Because it's unlike her to talk about these things.
I don't think it's an isolated instance, what we've seen on the WTA tour. Well, I have to think back to Rome when they put the WTA Rome final on at 11 p.m. and these decisions just don't present the WTA product in the best light. And I think that's what's so frustrating, because at the moment you've got what feels like a top four forming in terms of Swiatek, Rybakina, Sabalenka and Pegula, and you've got this really exciting moment. Coco Gauff's in there as well. It just doesn't present these players in the best way possible, and as a result we don't get the best matches possible, and it feels frustrating because you feel like there is so much more that this product can offer, but no one's going to be watching it, or a player is too tired. And I think that for me is what's kind of so frustrating about it. And as you said, the knock-on effect going from one tournament to another, well, it doesn't just affect in the moment, it affects the next tournament as well.
The
and
US
I think
Open.
that's again what is so potentially the US Open. That is what's so tricky, I think, about these back-to-back Masters events. Yes, I think it can work with the Sunshine Double because that's over a longer period of time, but 1 week to get in a 1,000 level event, to me, after what we've seen in Canada, on no roof, you're asking for trouble. And personally, I think it's too much to ask for.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I've never noticed it to this extent before, because this has unfortunately been a bit of a letdown of what could have been an epic tournament, and I think testament to the players on the WTA, because they get on with it no matter what. Rybakina was fighting for every single point at 3:30, knowing that probably this was her out of the tournament, and her hopes of winning the tournament would go with this result. And then Samsonova, I mean, it must have been pretty soul-destroying for her to have played one of the best breakout tournaments of her career and just not have anything in the tank for the final.
She loves playing the build-ups.
Washington champion last year. She was the queen of the 500.
Yeah.
She was Andrei Rublev from a few years ago. But either way, I think that was what was so nice with Pegula, who didn't celebrate too much. And she did also say, you guys need to give a round of applause to Samsonova, because she's played something like 5 matches in 3 days, because she really wanted to make it clear that it wasn't a case that Samsonova wasn't trying. She was really trying, but was in a difficult situation. But on Pegula, what did you think? Because people have talked about her as not always having the most exciting game or this.
You jumped the gun there, because I was going to ask you.
I took your question. You can ask
what
me.
I asked you about Jannik Sinner in terms of, this was her second Masters crown. I'm almost kind of like, I learnt more from her semi-final when I think she defeated Iga Swiatek, and I think if I'm correct in saying she's beaten Iga Swiatek twice now this year, and I learned a lot more, I think, from that match and where she is, I think, going into the US Open than the final. And I think we know Pegula is this sort of cornerstone of consistency on the tour, which is great. But I do wonder, with that result against Swiatek, I do think she knows how to beat her, and I don't see why she can't do it, for example, at a Grand Slam in the US Open coming up. And I think with this result, I personally would put Jessie Pegula up there with that result against Swiatek in the semi-final.
Yeah, I think you would have to put her up in the mix. I think the difference that I saw some highlights this week where she was moving so well. And for me, that's something which we haven't always necessarily thought was her biggest strength. Her movement, she's very balanced when she hits, and that's a really key part of her game, is that she puts herself with a great base, so she's able to play really well. But I hadn't seen the shot making combined with the movement. The serve's been working a treat. And she's also doing great on the doubles court, which we've talked about it so many times, but it really does help these players. And I think it's helping Coco. I think it's helping Pegula. I think it's all this time on court is really helping her tennis IQ, because she looked like she was, even when it went to a third set, she was composed. She was down. She kept going. She stuck to the game plan. And I think the mystery has definitely been a little bit solved by her. I mean, she did get bageled by...
She still needs to take the step, though. I'm still a little bit like, yes, I know that she can do this, but can she do it at Grand Slam? And I still think, she's got the perfect chance and opportunity to answer that at a home slam coming up in a few weeks, but we're still left with that question, I feel.
Yeah, we are. And I think that would be the question is, coming up to the the US Open, I mean, we've got two fantastic women's tennis players from the US in the top 10. We've got Coco and we've got Pegula. And I guess the question is, will one of them be able to go deep? Because we haven't necessarily seen that in the US Open, where we've had a US player going as deep for kind of a number of years now. I mean, we've had, obviously, Serena's had great success there. We've had Venus made some semi-finals, I think, as recently as 2017. We've had Sloane pick up the title. So I think it would be great to see, you know, for the nature of the spectacle with US fans, I think it would be great to see some of these guys go deep.
I mean, this week in Canada, we had both world number ones knocked out by Americans, Jessica Pegula and Tommy Paul. So, yeah, it shows that it can be done. But yeah, for Pegula, I still think we're gonna have to wait and see. But yeah, it was a good result for her.
What about Collins, Joel? She's back in business.
I know, right? She got to the quarters, lost to Swiatek. I stayed up late to watch that match, and I loved her like feistiness come out against against Sakkari? Had a little bit of a shout.
I think shut her mouth.
She told her off, didn't she?
She really did. And Sakkari,
shut your mouth.
Yeah, I kind of feel like she had a point, but I'm not sure I'd expressed it like that. But, you know, she lit up tennis Twitter. And I mean, Sakkari probably should have got disqualified for hitting the ball into the crowd. We've seen people be disqualified for less. I guess it wouldn't be right not to mention another player who had a fantastic return to the tour in the form of Caroline Wozniacki, picking up a first round win and then really pushing Wimbledon champion Vondrousova in that second set.
That second set.
Very promising. And she plays unfortunately, Svitolina this evening. I feel like that's a very tough first round, but what did you make of the Danes' return to the tour?
Yeah, I think it was as good as one hoped. She came through in a first round match very, very well against Kimberly Burrell. I thought, regardless of who her opponent is, like just coming back to the tour, that's no mean feat. So I was impressed with how emphatic that win was. And then, yeah, pushing Vondrousova in that second set. It gave me cause for optimism, I think, because, you know, Vondrousova is a Grand Slam champion. She's a Wimbledon champion. So, yeah, I was impressed. And, yeah, we'll see how she gets on. I think she's going to, need a few more wild cards to maybe just get her back onto the tour and find her feet. But certainly from the tennis she showed, I certainly feel like that is doable.
She's striking the ball well, I was going to say, just quickly. She's hitting big off both sides. She's definitely improved that forehand. The technique has improved. She's doing more damage with it.
Well, that was always the worry, wasn't it? That was always the worry, the forehand.
Yeah, it did always sit up a bit. And I think the perfect sort of ball height for Ostapenko, I remember that quarterfinal at Roland Garros where I just thought she was going to come through and she didn't. I think that must have been 2017 that year. But I thought she did a great job for returning. She's in great physical condition. And again, we got a lot of dangerous players in the early rounds at the US Open.
I was just going to add, Chris, I forgot to say this about 10 minutes ago, but the highlight for me personally in that final between Jessica Pegula and Samsonova was Cotton Eye Joe being played after Pegula won. I don't know if you saw this or if our listeners saw this. In the match between Pegula and Swiatek, all of a sudden the DJ, I think, accidentally played Cotton Eye Joe during a point. It was, I mean, I thought it was hilarious. I don't think the players were particularly amused, but the DJ then saw the funny side of it and brought it out.
Tried to redeem themselves.
The final at the end. Yeah, it was great. I absolutely loved it.
I think it certainly was a moment, and I think probably a moment of light relief that was kind of needed at the end of that final, because
it reminded me of like those gongs that went off in like Andy Murray Nishikori at US Open all those
there was
years
something
ago.
Yeah, there was,
like,
definitely
just like random noises that happened.
I would have liked to dance though.
And
that was the only thing that was missing for me. We had Coco do a dance last week, and I just think it's the perfect one to kind of get the arm out, the elbow going, but we never quite saw it. It was more of a followed her around rather than something that she embraced.
The only thing that could have maybe topped it if it was like a Danielle Collins on the court in like a really fiery moment and just sort of break the tension and break the ice. Cotton Eye Joe.
Imagine how that response would be. Shut your mouth, DJ.
It would have been so good. It would have been great. But we're going to take a quick break now. But join us in the second half where we will be discussing all the Davis Cup team announcements, plus having a look at the Cincinnati draws, including the return of Novak Djokovic to the North American hard courts. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, sponsored by downloadtennis.com. And now we are going to move on to a mysterious player. Have I got that right, Chris? You have got a mysterious player for me.
I have indeed. Joel, it's time you get back in the hot seat. You've had a number of weeks off.
I'm so scared. I'm scared of going back in the hot seat. That's why I'm the quiz master.
It's
I want to
okay
cower
because
away as answering the question.
you don't have the slam spoons of shame right now. That they are firmly in my hands, unfortunately. But yes, we have a mysterious player. You actually have a very good track record at mysterious players, so you should be rejoicing that this isn't one where I'm setting par. For anyone who has not encountered us do a mysterious player as par for the courts, the way that it works is that I will reveal a number of clues. After each clue, Joel will get to guess, or has to guess, even if he doesn't know who he thinks the mysterious player is that I'm describing. And hopefully he will get it, but if he doesn't, another clue will be given. So Joel, are you ready?
And our listeners will just collectively shake their heads.
They'll shake their heads, they'll do much better, and they'll tell us on Twitter.
Okay, right, I'm ready.
It does start a bit tricky. I haven't gone for a date of birth this time, but
Ooh.
I have won 34 career titles.
34. So probably been around quite a while. Are they past or present? Andre Agassi.
I will continue.
Okay.
My career high was world number 2.
Okay. Gustavo Curtin? I'm going old school, but I feel like that's maybe plausible.
You seem to, that's a theory you've really got in your head, that these people are non-active players, but I can tell you it's not Gustavo Curtin. I do believe he was world number 1. So I think Paul Guga there, I think he had done that. But this might help you, Joel. I won the ATP Newcomer of the Year in 1988 and the Most Improved Player in 1989.
Okay, so it's definitely a male player, and it's definitely the generation before I have had my brain in. What years again were they?
88 for Best Newcomer and 89 for Most Improved.
I think I know who it is.
Who do you think it is?
Is it Magnus Norman?
Oh, that's a good guess. He is a former world number 2. I have to say, unfortunately, we will continue.
Oh, I thought I had it. I thought I had you there.
The clues are not bad. So, I'm the youngest player to win a main draw match at the US Open in 1987 when I was 15 years old.
I think this is right. Is it Michael Chang?
It's Michael Chang. It is.
Yes.
Fantastic effort, Joel.
Unbelievable. As soon as you said youngest at US Open, he was an unbelievable talent when he was a youngster.
He has all of the youngest records. And the next clue was going to be that in 1989, he became the youngest ever male slam winner when he won the French Open aged 17 and 110 days, defeating Stefan Edberg in that final in 5 sets. And then the final clue, if you really weren't going to get it, was going to be that he's the long-term coach or coaching assistant to Kei Nishikori. That was the final one, which I thought you might remember because he was in the box for all of those big matches, but he no longer travels with him. But a fantastic talent that quite often doesn't get the recognition he deserves.
I also think he used to hold the record for longest Grand Slam match before Isner Mahut. I'm 85% certain he held the record for longest Grand Slam match in terms of minutes. But he was a phenomenal talent.
We'll fact check it, Joel, at some point. I should have used that as a clue. But do tell us, listeners, did you get it before Joel? Did you get it from 34 career titles? If you did, maybe we need to send you a mug because that is impressive. But Joel, you've redeemed yourself. You've survived another week. in the hot seat.
I survive. I live to fight on. Right. I want to go back to being quizmaster. A lot more comfortable.
You bought yourself at least 3 weeks off.
Right, let's move on to the Tennis Weekly mailbag. And we had Sheila get in touch with us on email this week. And her question was this. With the Lionesses in the semi-finals of the World Cup and in Canada last week, the players building fantasy hockey teams, my question is, who would be in your 11-a-side Tennis Weekly WTA fantasy football team?
Ooh. Very topical, Sheila.
I am dreadful. I have so many of my friends at the moment be like, Joel, set up a fantasy football team for the Premier League that's just started, and I just can't get involved because my team's just so
Your
diabolical.
team is tennis. Let's be honest. Your team better be tennis. So we have 11 players, I believe, then, Joel. We have listeners, we have put our heads together for this. To try and come up with the best team, because we had some fantastic answers from some of the players on their fantasy hockey teams. But shall we kick it off with our goalkeeper, Joel?
There's only one place, Chris, you can start with goalkeeper, and that is Iga Swiatek with all the hand movements at the net.
At the net, she's great
I think
at the
she
net.
would make a great goalkeeper, exactly.
I mean, that's a really good one. In the defensive lineup now, so I thought left back, it's got to be a left-hander. I've gone for Angie Kerber because I just think she's solid as a rock.
Yeah.
She's a wall when it comes to defence. And I figured that nothing's going to get past her. Yeah? Am I allowed that one?
Yeah, can see that. I've got in the centre-back position Arina Sabalenka because I just think she's so intimidating and
Nothing's getting past that.
and scary, composing. I think you need that. You just need that presence, I think, in that position.
She does have striker energy as well, though, but I will allow you that. I've also gone...
Like centre forward. She could be like centre forward as well. Yeah, I agree.
Well, maybe she'd be a centre in netball. She's the keystone. But different sport. But in the centre back, I've gone for Jessica Pegula because I do think she's displayed some fantastic defensive skills. Great on the doubles court as well.
And her dad can bring all the money in to get all the transfer in the transfer market, right?
Well, we'll make sure that everyone stays on the team. No one leaves.
And I'm going to go complete the back line with Haddad Maya as well. I think she's got
love Haddad Maya. Yeah, she's good in defense.
Yeah, I think she'll have some. She's just great at everything. So
if it goes
I think
to extra time, she's still got a lot of energy. That's for sure. And then I've got in the midfield, I've gone for Wozniacki left mid, centre mid Krejcikova. I think that they are great bankers in that, and that backhand of Wozniacki is going to be very valuable down the left wing.
Yeah, and I'm going to add Svitolina as well into the mix there. I think she'd be great in centre, particularly I think in centre mid, just sort of running the show. She's such a universally loved player. I feel like she can just talk to defence. Yeah, talk to defence, talk to the attack. Perfect position for her.
And then who have you got completing the lineup in midfield?
Sorry. How could I forget? Danielle Collins has to be in there just for some feisty.
Maybe we'll make her captain. Captain? Do you think she'd be captain?
I think she gets sent off before.
Probably.
I think
We've
maybe
given her
she'd be a bit of a liability.
Already.
Yeah, I think she'll be most prone to getting a yellow card, but she, for me, will get like properly stuck in. So I've got Danielle Collins as well.
And in our forward
who have you
position,
got up
Sheila.
Front?
Yeah, I've got Coco Gauff. I've gone for because she's very speedy, and if she gets that break, I think she will do fantastic. And she will definitely be able to pull away from the opposition. And then finally, Joel, in our 11-a-side, who have we got?
Ons Jabeur. It's got to be. She's just so well loved. The fans will get behind Ons Jabeur easily.
Trick shots.
And I think if she's going to show off the trick shots on the tennis court, she can do some nutmegs and rabonas,
for
I think,
a highlight
on the
reel.
pitch.
Exactly. And then I did write.
Exactly.
Sorry, I've got one extra on the bench is Raducanu until she's fit. I have to. I couldn't not. She's on every team I'll ever pick.
Yes, definitely. Well, I mean, on the subject of England v Australia, we do have Davis Cup nominations in because we are going to be in Manchester coming up in September, where GB and Australia will be. France and Team Switzerland are also there. So we do have the teams that have been announced. So GB, Cam Norrie, Dan Evans, Andy Murray, Neil Skupski. Switzerland's going to have Stan Wawrinka. Dominic Stricker is also going to be there. Australia will have Alex de Minaur, Jordan Thompson, Max Purcell, which I think is quite a handy third singles
He's
player.
the Storm Hunter of the group, you know?
Yeah.
Secret weapon.
Oh, yeah. And doubles as well, exactly. Kokkinakis and Ebden. And then France, Manarino, Humbert, Fee, Royer Vasselin, and Nicolas Mahut. I didn't realise Nicolas Mahut was still going on the old French team. But Chris, what do you make of that? I mean, as I say, GB squad, they've only announced 4 at the moment. So Norrie, Evans, Murray back in, and Neil Skupski. Are you happy with that?
Where's Jack Draper? That's all I have to say. Always where's Jack Draper? Right? Because if he's going to make the Olympics with Raducanu for me, you know, he needs to start playing some Davis Cup. But no, I'm pleased to see the lineup because I think we're finally making and selecting for a team, because I think it's so important with Davis Cup that you do pick a team that plays well together. And if Salisbury and Skupski are not a natural doubles pairing, it doesn't make sense, because we've seen time and time again that if you are looking for the best players on a court, so many times singles players are actually better at doubles than the doubles specialists, but they just don't commit to playing it. And I'm not saying that that's true in all cases, but if you take an Andy Murray on a doubles court in height of his career, I think he gives a very good option there as well, playing with Dan or playing with Neil. And then I do think we need another singles player in there, because I do think that you want to make sure that you have enough people that you can share the load throughout the week, because we've seen that you can't all do a Benjic and Teichmann at the Billie Jean King Cup and just play 2 players in every match. You have to have strength and depth. So I think we've got a pretty solid team there, solid base. I think that, very unexpected to see what will come from France, but the big threat is from the number 2 seeds in Australia, because they've got some real tricky players there. And Kokkinakis, we know on his day, as the 4th player, he can do some damage, and Matt Ebden's still handy on a singles court at times.
And Purcell was very handy. He was very unlucky, I think, to not defeat Andy Murray in Canada. So I feel like they are the team to beat, but you can obviously never count out GB at home. And with 2 teams going through to the finals, you'd like to think GB could hopefully kind of sneak through.
It's a tough group, but then I also saw it's a tougher group out in Valencia, I believe, because I saw that Alcaraz and Djokovic have both been named, Joel. So that might go straight from the US Open final, not saying it will happen, but wouldn't bet against it, and then have a repeat in Valencia.
That would be wild. That would be wild. We don't normally get, I feel, real big, heavy-hitting solo singles matchups in
the Olympics,
in like
Joel.
Team tennis. Yeah,
it's the Olympic qualification.
Do you remember we had that one great match between Nadal and Djokovic in the ATP Cup? That's, to be honest, to me, that's like the only thing that was great about the ATP Cup was probably that singles match. But it just doesn't happen that often. We have to sort of cling ourselves to these potential hopes. But it could very well happen, couldn't it?
It could indeed. And there's also the announcement in terms of another group which has the US in, where it's being led by Francis Tiafoe and Tommy Paul. But noticeable absence from that team is Taylor Fritz. But there's also Mackenzie McDonald, Rajiv Ram, and Austin Krajicek. So they're prioritising the doubles there. But do you think Fritz didn't make himself available for this straight after the US Open?
Yeah, potentially. I just think that they've got enough. They've got enough depth there that
he'll play the finals, but doesn't need to play the qualifier.
Yeah, it is tricky though, because like they're all the way in Split, and it's a long slog, isn't it? If you're potentially going deep, in New
born
York,
at Turich and you're going home anyway.
Well, true. Yeah, I am expecting though, as always with these sorts of things, there'll be some dropouts inevitably along the way and replacements, etc. But certainly the US, given their team, they look like they're the favourites in Croatia. Definitely,
I'd agree with that. But nevertheless, a very good lineup across the board, and it looks like this year, heading up to an Olympic cycle, there's going to be some great Davis Cup action.
Let's look at Cincinnati very, very quickly. Defending champions here. Again, a couple of surprising names. Caroline Garcia and Borna Coric. Let's look at the men's draw quickly. The big talking point here, Chris, is Novak Djokovic is back. Saw him on the practice courts. It's like, again, he's like in this sort of disciple territory where like thousands of fans are watching his practices.
Well,
I think
with the
he was
beard
even
as well. He
surprised
does
by...
look like a disciple, doesn't he? Yeah.
But I mean, I think he was even surprised by how the reception he was getting in Cincinnati. But yeah, what do you make of the draw that we've got? As I said, Djokovic is the second seed, right at the bottom of the draw. Carlos Alcaraz is at the top. And then you've got Tsitsipas and Medvedev making up the top four. Where are your eyes drawn to in this draw?
Well, I mean, I'd love to see a Sinner Djokovic quarterfinal. I think that would be really interesting heading into the US Open. That's for sure. I think I'm also looking at the likes of Alcaraz to see how he'll do this week. I think he's got a pretty decent draw. But Tommy Paul, again, he's floating there. He's seeded to play him. That'll be in the third round, I believe. So it's not easy. But I would say, Joel, I've been looking at some of these first round encounters, and we've got Seb Korda versus Borna Coric, and he's defending champion. That's not a draw you want to see on US soil. We've got Zverev versus Dimitrov, and we've got Berrettini, Felix Auger-Aliassime. So, I mean, it is absolutely stacked. There's nowhere to hide. And
yeah, I agree. And I think in contrast actually to Carlos Alcaraz, I actually think Novak Djokovic's draw is pretty tricky, because he could have his first match back could be Davidovich-Fokina. He got to the semi-finals in Canada. Alex de Minaur, who was the finalist, could also be there. Yeah, I know. It's just crazy. I don't know about you,
but
to
Norrie's there. Goodness.
Yeah. To me, honestly, de Minaur and Davidovich-Fokina are like the two players on the men's draws. They just perennially seem to be unseeded, and it just perennially seems to be unfair, I feel, to everyone else.
If I had to say right now, what is Davidovich-Fokina's rank? What would you say, Joel?
I don't know. I feel like he plays
depends
borderline
on the week.
top 10 tennis at times. Yeah, it depends on the week.
Is he a top 30 or is he a top 10? He's 21 in the live rankings. I'll say that would be his career high. Okay. So we'll see. He should be seeded though, surely.
Well, I mean, right? He should be.
In the US at least.
But moving on to the women's draw. I mean, we've got Swiatek as the top seed. Sabalenka is there. All the usual names, really. Jessica Pegula, Rybakina make up the top four seeds. We'll wait and see if Rybakina does play it, because it's been quite a quick turnaround, for her in terms of the amount of tennis that she has played. Ons Jabeur is there. She wasn't in Canada, in Montreal, but she is back as the fifth seed. Again, Chris, where's your head turning to here? Because there are also some very familiar matchups that we got in Montreal happening in Cincinnati.
There are. I'll tell you what, I am so relieved. Being 5-2 down, Sloane Stephens has now won. She is through. So wow. I can now look at the rest of the draw. And from my quick glance, Danielle Collins versus Pavlyuchenkova. Pavlyuchenkova, quarterfinal at the French. We haven't seen her in action much since.
Could get a DC Swiatek rematch in the second round.
Exactly. We've got Venus versus Kudermetova that's on right now. And then we also have some very, very tasty encounters. I mean, it is just so stacked, these draws at this stage, of Haddad Maia versus an unseeded Mukova, as well as Jennifer Brady Donovekic. And Jennifer Brady played fantastically. We've got, Azarenka Krejcikova. I just think this is wide open, and I think we will see some upsets. But where are you looking, Joel?
I do like that you spoke about Jen Brady, because I think a lot of the focus on the returns, what has been on Svitolina, Caroline Wozniacki, but Jen Brady coming back, she is. I forgot she got to a Grand Slam final, having
done hard quarantine. So if she's fully fit, imagine what she can do.
I know. So I'm excited to see her back on the court. I think I'm looking. Iga Swiatek. I'm keen to see Rybakina as well, to see if she pulls out. Maybe even Linda Noskova.
She's had a week off.
Yeah, and she's got Samsonova in the first round. We'll have to wait and see if Samsonova plays. I hope she does, and I hope she can recuperate, and maybe Cincinnati can give her a little bit of as much time as possible. But yeah, I think she will be. Who knows? Maybe she'll be another handful this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's anyone's, and I think that it would be great to see Jen Brady, pick up some points and some momentum, because
agree.
I do think we're gearing up for the US Open to be a really interesting slam, because we haven't had the heights across the women's necessarily throughout the year, and I think we really could do with some big clashes and some really excellent night sessions on Arthur Ashe. I think the WTA definitely needs it.
I mean, for the US Open, I believe the cutoff for points for seeding is Cincinnati. So it's like now or never, and I think that's particularly important to players like and Andy Murray is very much on the cusp. Probably doesn't want to rely on withdrawals happening to get a seeding. So it'll be fascinating to see what takes place. We're going to end, Chris, as usual, with some predictions. I would like you to tell me who've you got. I know we just did champions, I think, last time round for Canada, but for Cincinnati, give me your 2 finalists and champion for the men and for the women.
I'm going to go for Medvedev. And I'm going to go for Medvedev-Rublev. I'm going to go for the final with the Medvedev champion. I think Djokovic will peak at the US. And then for the women, I think that Goff's got a great draw. I don't think Rybakina is going to play, so I'm going to go for Goff, and I'm going to go for Sabalenka. And I'm going to say Sabalenka's going to get it.
Okay, fair enough.
They were real time. I hadn't done that in advance. All listeners, please forgive me. I'm backing out of it now.
I have thought long and hard about this.
And we'll still get it wrong.
And yeah, I'm going Tommy Paul, Novak Djokovic in the men's final.
Okay, he's lost the plot.
Djokovic winning. And then I've got, similar to you, I've got Coco Gauff, Jessie Pegula in my ladies final. It'd be like a friendly final, doubles partners. Had a great match, very close match in Canada.
Winning?
I think maybe we could be on for a repeat. I'm going Coco Gauff this time. I think there's more to come. There's more to come from Coco Gauff. So I'm going that, but they will inevitably be wrong because they're never right.
Kim will get it right. I'm sure Kim's got it right.
Kim will get it right. Yeah, we need to.
Yeah, she's got it right. To be in Vienna and miss predictions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's all really exciting. All systems go in the second Masters event pre-US Open, the one I feel everyone is really can look at and see and gauge what people's form is going into the final Grand Slam of the year. So it's all very, very exciting. But listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action to come from the ATP and WTA tours. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
And you can also follow the show on social media or email the show. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at the handle Tennis Weekly Pod. We also have our Etsy shop where you can get our limited edition exclusive Tennis Weekly merchandise. That's etsy.com/shop/Tennis Weekly podcast. You can email the show tennisweeklypod@gmail.com or check out the website tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back next Monday at Tennis Weekly HQ to catch up on all the action from Cincinnati. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.